American lives. The stadium had gone completely silent. Marcus himself looked stunned. He recognized Dalton now, a man he hadn't seen in nearly 8 years. The officer cleared his throat awkwardly. "We received a complaint." Dalton nodded slowly. "Then verify it properly. But humiliating a Marine in front of his son is not the way to do it." One of the SEALs stepped forward, a tall man with a calm but intimidating presence. "And just for the record," he added, "every man standing here would trust Staff Sergeant Reed with our lives." The crowd erupted into whispers and gasps. On the field, Daniel stood frozen, staring up at the bleachers as the tension unfolded. The officers hesitated, suddenly aware that hundreds of people were watching and recording on their phones. Finally, the first officer muttered, "Sir, if you have identification." Marcus calmly pulled out his military ID and retirement papers. Dalton glanced at them briefly before handing them to the officers. "There's your verification." The officer looked embarrassed as he examined the documents. "Everything appears to be in order." Dalton raised an eyebrow. "Of course it does." A long, uncomfortable pause followed before the officer finally said, "Staff Sergeant Reed, you're free to return to your seat." Marcus took a breath. "I never left it voluntarily." Then he turned and walked back up the bleachers, the 6 SEALs following quietly behind him. And suddenly the silence broke into applause. First a few claps, then dozens, then the entire stadium rising to its feet. Parents cheered. Students on the field began clapping and shouting. Daniel wiped tears from his eyes as he watched his father walk back to his seat with quiet dignity. But the biggest twist of all was still waiting. Because later that afternoon, when Daniel's name was called as valedictorian, he stepped up to the podium, looked out at the thousands of faces, and began his speech with words that would soon be shared across the entire country. "Today, I learned something about courage, and it wasn't from a textbook. It was from the man sitting in the bleachers wearing a Marine uniform, my father." The stadium erupted again as Marcus lowered his head, overwhelmed with pride, realizing that the moment meant to shame him had instead shown his son and the entire community what true honor looks like. What would you do if a father who served his country was humiliated in front of hundreds of people on the proudest day of his son's life, and the only people willing to stop it were 6 silent warriors sitting in the crowd? Before we begin this unforgettable story, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications, because stories like this remind us that courage, honor, and brotherhood still exist in this world, and you won't want to miss the next one. The morning sun hung warm and bright over the football field of Jefferson Ridge High School in Virginia, as families filled the metal bleachers for graduation day. Balloons floated, cameras flashed, and proud parents waved at their children dressed in caps and gowns lined up on the grass below. Among the crowd sat a tall, broad-shouldered black man wearing a neatly pressed dark blue Marine dress uniform. His name was Marcus Reed, a retired Marine Staff Sergeant whose face carried the quiet discipline of someone who had spent decades protecting a country that sometimes struggled to respect him back. Marcus wasn't there to be noticed. He wasn't there to talk about his service or his medals. He was there for one reason: his son Daniel Reed, the first person in their family to graduate high school with honors. Marcus sat alone near the center of the bleachers, his posture straight, his eyes locked on the line of graduates. Daniel had begged his father to wear his uniform that day. "I want people to see the man who raised me," he had said the night before. Marcus had resisted at first, but eventually agreed, pressing the uniform carefully in the small apartment they shared. What neither of them expected was that the uniform would turn their proud moment into a confrontation no one in the stadium would forget. As the ceremony began, the principal stepped up to the microphone. The band played softly, and the crowd quieted. Marcus watched Daniel laugh with classmates while adjusting his cap. Pride filled Marcus's chest so strongly that for a moment it pushed away the memories of long deployments, missed birthdays, and the painful divorce that had left him raising Daniel alone. He whispered quietly to himself, "You made it, son." But about 15 minutes into the ceremony, something changed. 2 police officers walking along the side of the bleachers stopped when they noticed Marcus. One of them pointed. They spoke quietly to each other before climbing the steps toward him. Marcus didn't notice them at first. His attention was still on the field. The first officer cleared his throat. "Sir?" he said sharply. Marcus turned politely. "Yes, officer?" The second officer looked Marcus up and down with suspicion. We've received a report that someone in the crowd is impersonating military personnel. We're going to need you to come with us." For a second, Marcus thought he'd misheard. "Impersonating?" he asked calmly. "I'm a retired Marine Staff Sergeant." The officers exchanged skeptical looks. "Do you have identification proving that?" one asked. Marcus nodded slowly and reached for his wallet, but the officer held up a hand. "Actually, we'd prefer if you step down with us first." Around them, a few parents had begun to notice the exchange. Marcus felt dozens of eyes slowly turning toward him. His jaw tightened. "Officer," he said quietly, "my son is graduating down there. I'd prefer not to miss it." But the officer's tone hardened. "Sir, you need to cooperate. Now." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Someone whispered, "What's going on?" Another voice said, "Why are they bothering him?" Marcus stood slowly, keeping his composure the way the Marines had trained him to do decades earlier. He began walking down the bleacher steps between the officers, determined to resolve the misunderstanding quickly. On the field below, Daniel noticed movement in the crowd and squinted toward the bleachers. His smile faded when he recognized his father being escorted by police. Confusion flashed across his face. Back in the stands, Marcus reached the bottom of the steps when the second officer spoke again, louder this time. "We're also going to need you to remove that uniform until we verify your claim." The words hit Marcus like a punch. Remove the uniform? In front of his son? In front of hundreds of strangers? He swallowed hard. "Officer, with respect, this uniform represents 20 years of service. I will gladly show you my ID, but I will not remove it in the middle of my son's graduation." The officer stepped closer, voice rising. "Sir, if you refuse to comply, we will remove you from the premises." The tension in the air thickened. Cameras stopped clicking. Conversations fell silent. Marcus felt humiliation burning in his chest, but he remained calm. "You're making a mistake," he said quietly. And that was the moment everything changed. Because several rows behind where Marcus had been sitting, 6 men who had remained silent until now slowly stood up. They had arrived earlier wearing simple suits and sunglasses, blending into the crowd like ordinary guests. But anyone trained to notice would have seen the posture, the alert eyes, the quiet confidence of people accustomed to dangerous situations. One of them spoke first, his voice steady but unmistakably authoritative. "Officers, you might want to reconsider what you're doing." The officers turned, annoyed. "Sir, this doesn't involve you." The man stepped forward. "Actually, it does." One by one, the other 5 men stood beside him. They moved with a calm precision that drew immediate attention. The first man reached into his jacket and calmly displayed a badge and identification wallet. "Commander Eric Dalton," he said. "United States Navy." Then he gestured toward the others. "And these gentlemen are active-duty Navy SEALs." A wave of shocked murmurs rolled through the crowd. The officer's expression shifted from irritation to uncertainty. Dalton's eyes moved to Marcus, then back to the officers. "Staff Sergeant Marcus Reed served alongside my unit during joint operations in Afghanistan. If you're accusing him of impersonation, then you're accusing a decorated Marine who saved